Okay, we are a little bit after 2 o'clock, so let's go on and begin our webinar. Our executive director, Dave Caudell at the Frist Center for Autism and Innovation, is not going to be able to join us. I just got a note from him that he's not feeling well. So unfortunately, if you haven't met him yet, you won't get to today, but that's absolutely something that could happen in the future. Dave and I began this webinar 3 or 4 months ago, talked about what it would look like to have online programming while we're all stuck at home, and how that would also be an opportunity to reach out to people who are not local. And so here you are at the second installment of the Autistics Roundtable webinar. The purpose of this webinar being to always have autistic voices, whether it's in the panel, sometimes it'll be the presenter, sometimes the presenter will be a researcher or expert of some other type. We've had lots of people so far who are family member advocates who love somebody on the spectrum and have that firsthand experience. So we've got a lot of people that I think it's going to be really interesting for you to grab their perspective today. Our presenter is going to be Somnath Sengupta, who has a PhD and is the founder of Every Life Works. So he's going to talk about his experience with autism and entrepreneurship, self-employment, and the way that this can be a really exciting, viable option for autistic adults, and some of the hurdles that have to be passed for an autistic adult to be able to accomplish self-employment successfully. We're also joined by another self-advocate on the panel. I'm a self-advocate, which is one of the reasons I'll be moderating this panel, and I'm the communications coordinator at Vanderbilt Center for Autism and Innovation. And we're going to hear from the Autism Possible founder, Dr. Teresa Vasquez, Dan Berger, a self-advocate and entrepreneur, and Brynn Plummer, the VP of Inclusion, and I think Community Engagement maybe. We couldn't fit all the words on the graphic, at the Nashville Entrepreneurship Center. So I'm very excited about this. I hope you are as well. Yeah, we may have a couple of folks join in as we continue to present, but whether we do or not, what we're going to do while the presentation is happening is just turn off our video and mute. Even if you're a panelist, if you are not our presenter for the very first section, we're all going to turn off our video, we're all going to mute, and that way we'll be able to focus specifically on our presentation. It should be around 20 minutes. So if you have a short attention span like me, no worries. We are going to get to the point and learn some interesting stuff. Yeah, if you have a question during the presentation, put it in the chat feature and we will be sure to get to it immediately after. And if you're just watching, and don't have a question about the presentation, but want to ask the panelists something later, we will again use the chat feature. So I'm excited for us to have an intimate group today. Hopefully we'll get to have a discussion about y'all's questions and your interest in this area, and then share this on YouTube later with everyone who couldn't be here. So I am going to hand the floor over to Somnath. Y'all should be seeing him. And what I'm also going to do is share my screen and go through the slides. So Somnath, if you want to begin, your screen should be up any minute.
Right here?
Yep, there you go. You should be seeing it.
Okay, so you will go through it, right?
Yep,
okay.
I got it.
All right, so thank you everybody. Thank you, Claire, for inviting me. This is something I must tell you, this entrepreneurship for autism is something that I live and breathe every day. And because through my work over the last 4.5 years, and by the way, as a background, we have a son, 29 years old, who is in the spectrum. So it was he who kind of got me in this track. And over the last 4 years of working on this field, I am almost as close to 100% convinced I ever will be that probably entrepreneurship is the viable option for adults with autism. And my presentation, what I'm going to do, I'm going to present to you some statistics. I'm going to present to you how you may go about thinking about starting a new business. I'm going to talk to you about my background, and then we can have some discussions. All right, so next chart. Why am I not seeing your chart? Okay, wait a second.
Hey guys, are we seeing the slide?
Okay, now I got it. I got it.
Okay.
I think I have a control on it, Claire.
Oh, great.
Yeah, well, that's surprising that I have control on anything. But So here are some facts that you can, and I essentially what I do, since I am by training a scientist and an engineer, anytime I give you any fact, I would try to give you the link to where I got the fact from. So if you look at the autism facts, right, what you can see at the second round circle that says 90% of adults with autism are either unemployed or underemployed. Okay, that number varies. People can say it's 80% or 85%. It doesn't matter. But the bottom line is there's a whole lot of people within the spectrum that are unemployed. Okay, so there is that. On the other side, as you see, as the diagnosis gets better and better, there are more and more children who are being diagnosed with autism. Okay, so if you believe in the statistics of 1 in 68 or 1 in 50 or something, and you go through the US population, at any given instant, you may have about 2 to 5 million people in the spectrum. Now, if you drop down to the yellow box, those are the statistics you will get from Autism Care about how much it costs for the whole, lifespan of a person with autism. And then there is the other side in the blue box that talks about loss of income, parental income loss to support family members. They may not be fully employed. So if you look at neurotypical adults who mostly in the last 10 or so years of your career, if you have a 30, 35-year career, last 10 to so years that your earnings peak, right? And if you look at the $55,000 or so, that is like the average income in this country now, maybe a little bit less depending on where you are, and you multiply with the 2 million citizens that may be in the spectrum, you can see how much over the lifespan of revenue we are missing out because we are not doing something about employment, okay? So essentially the question I pose myself is that imagine if we had employment for all of them, okay? So looking at this vast topic, the next step, is, so why not? Well, if you look at it, what I'm showing you in the next chart are the conventional route of getting a job. You fill out an application, they go through resume screening. As you know, today they do all kinds of what you might call robotic screening, so on and so forth. Then they call you for interview and whatnot. They look at your communication skills, right? They see whether you can, get past the interview, okay? So going through all those things, it essentially becomes very clear that quite a few of these, if there are people in the spectrum, they may or may not be able to get over. And if you superimpose on that unemployment in this country, or choose any country, is not at 0%. There is already a portion of the country, especially now, that is highly unemployed. So there doesn't seem to be any incentive for employers to cross over that neurotypical population and get to the spectrum population, okay? So, given all these barriers, what is the bright part? So this is a question I had to ask myself when I first started out about 4 years ago. How do you have a sustainable employment? By the way, what I mean by sustainable employment, I'll give you an example, is most of you may not be old enough to remember, but there was a time in this country that there was manual checkout by clerks in the what you might call in grocery stores and every place. Well, those are mostly gone. They're all automated checkout. That is what I mean by sustainable employment. If you have skills that technology can wipe you out, that is not a sustainable employment. You have to be ahead of the curve. Now, so how can you get a sustainable employment, not worry about an interview, do something you may like at your own pace, and last but not the least, never worry about getting fired? You ask yourself this question, the answer is very simple. Start your own business, okay? Be an entrepreneur. So what are the statistics about entrepreneurship. These are all the statistics you can get if you look at small business, and some of them I've highlighted. Well, if you look at the first one, okay, and this is plain mathematics, simple math. It is very well documented that your wealth in the lifetime of your lifespan of your employment will be far higher if you are self-employed versus if you're working for somebody in the same job, okay, same type of job. And then there are many other ones. Talks about how many Americans are full-time self-employed and whatnot. Number 5, 26% of entrepreneurs, the biggest motivation was to be their own boss. Now, if you look at number 6 and number 12, Claire already told you I have a PhD. So in no means am I saying that higher education is not needed. However, what I am saying that if you want to go on your own, you don't have to wait all the way. You could go out on your own if you have the gumption to do it at any level of your career, okay? So given all these things that, that there is a bright side of being an entrepreneur or starting your own business, that statistically, yeah, of course, the rate of failure of a business, they say 1 in 5 business fails in the first, 2 years or even less. So given all these things that there is some bright side to it, it is so far looking good. So now what do you do? Well, here's the hard part. Here are the questions you have to answer. And if you can answer all these questions, if you go and do a search on Google, how to start a business, I can guarantee you these questions which I'm putting out here are the questions you will see in different forms. Because if you answer these questions, you have essentially written yourself a business plan. Now I'll tell you where I got these questions from. Okay, these are not my questions. There is an organization in the Department of Defense called DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. If you have not heard of it, look it up. DARPA is the fuel behind all innovations that happen in this country in the defense sector and then spills over to the commercial sector. In DARPA, since people go with all different kinds of ideas, back in the 70s, one of the directors, George Heilmeyer, came up with these questions. And these are called Heilmeyer's questions. Essentially, if you go with an idea to DARPA and say, I would like to have some money to develop my idea, here's what he will ask you. And this is essentially the questions you should ask yourself if you want to go about starting your business. First of all, ask yourself, what are you trying to do? And that part, using absolutely no jargon. In other words, you should be able to explain it to your grandmother. You should be able to explain it to your young family members, anybody. What are you trying to do? Then comes, how is it done today and what are the limits of current practice? That's what is called the competitive market analysis in business plan. What's new in your approach and why do you think it will be successful? New in your approach is what is called the differentiator, or in other words, why should people buy from you and not from somebody else? And why do you think it will be successful? So you have to define what is your differentiator. Who cares? If you're successful, what difference will it make? So that in business lingo is called the market, or what they call the total accessible market. You will hear that acronym a lot if you go into starting a business called TAM, T-A-M, total accessible market, okay? What are the risks and payoffs? Well, anytime you want to start a business, or even if you're writing a proposal from where you are for getting funding, you have to outline the risks. I will tell you this, if you walk into a place to ask for money, let's say a venture capitalist or an angel, and they ask you what are the risks of your business, and you say, oh, there are no risks. That's the end of the discussion, okay? And the other question, which is a death nail, and if you cannot answer, is, okay, so how are people doing it today? Who are the other people working in this field? And you say, oh, there are no other people in this field, I'm the only one. That tells you either A, you don't know your market, or B, It has been tested before and found out that it doesn't work, so that's why there is nobody in the market. So you have to know your competition. You have to know your risks, okay? And you have to know what are the payoffs. And then, of course, how much will it cost and how long will it take? How do you measure success? And last but not the least, why now? Okay? Why is it that, 20 years ago, if somebody went and proposed something with robots, it probably wouldn't have gotten off the ground. But given how advanced robotics has become now, you can actually go and propose something with robots in it, and you can answer that question, why now? Okay? So all these questions you have to answer no matter what business you're starting. You can, and I will show you later on how I have used these things. Every time I have an idea in my head, and I have a lot of ideas that go through my head for autism employment, I put it through this. And trust me, some of those ideas do not get through, okay? Or some of the ideas become so marginal, you'd say that, you know what, I don't think it's worth doing this, okay? So you have to look at the, payoff. The next one, I'll talk to you about my background and experience, okay? So back in the 90s, I used to work for the Army Research Lab and for the government, the Department of Defense. So a few of us left as, the technology we developed within the government, we were approached by a very large commercial company while we were in the government to work with us. Somehow it didn't work out. So we thought to ourselves that, we will never know how big this technology could be unless we do something about it. And that's when we left the federal government and we started our own business, okay? So inside the Army Research Lab, as I'm showing you, from 1991 to 1998, we kind of developed the technology. Very important, I must tell you, is the bottom where I underline patents. Anytime you have an idea and you want to start a business, make sure you protect your idea, okay? It's very important that you protect your idea, okay? This phase, which you're looking at, I call it as the, in the below, as you can see, the incubation phase. So we were fortunate to incubate the technology within the federal government. And then in March of 1998, we created Paratek Microwaves. And from there onwards, it became a venture-funded company. We actually raised venture capital. And through the life of the company from 1998 to the time it was, acquired by BlackBerry in 2012, it raised several hundred millions of dollars to stand up the company. And the company sold for a good amount of money also. So that is where I got my experience and taste of entrepreneurship. Understand that before that, I was just a federal employee, but we took the risk, we went through the risk. It was it's pretty hard, believe it or not, okay? And we ended up on the right side. So having gotten that, experience, what did I learn from it? One thing you will learn is that don't ever shy away from hiring the right people in a business. In fact, they tell you should hire people who are better than you are. You have to be ambitious, always push the limits. Never ever do the wrong thing, always do the right thing. If it is necessary to walk away from a deal, is essential. Plans are useless. What he essentially meant was that you have to continually plan. Continuously, as you learn, you plan. Commit yourself to it. Maybe burn your boats. What I mean by that, when we started our company, none of us had any money coming in, but we started the company. Okay, so you have to kind of do that. Face your fear, follow the money. You have to, since you have started a profitable for-profit business, you have to go after the money. Protect your idea. There again, the patents and other things. And as you see, work on a differentiable technology, which was in those hallmark question, why are you so different? And yes, stay in the future, just keep pushing. So when you talk about these things, there is always this question about people say, you should do something that you're passionate about. So what does it mean by having a passion in a for-profit business? What it means that you should have the dedication to go through the fear and make it to the other side, okay? Because if you are so dedicated, believe me, when you talk to people, they see as you very well know, 75% or more than that, communication is, what you might call nonverbal. People are watching your body language, right? So if you are passionate about it, it comes out in your body language. That is why you should have passion, because people can see that you're really committed to it, okay? And it also helps you, stay honest. Notice that I'm not talking about money here, because being passionate, following the right route, doing the right business plan, and knowing why you are doing it, if everything converges, money will come, not the other way around, okay? So here's how I applied. You can see on the left-hand side, the questions I posed before, and on the right-hand side, how I applied to Every Life Works. So what are you trying to do? Articulate your objectives. Well, here's the answer to the right-hand side. I'm starting micro businesses so that they can earn, they meaning the adults with autism can earn average US income in the next 10 years. That's the definition. That's it. There's no jargon in it. How is it done today? The newness in the model is training plus paid internship. All my students who come to Every Life Works, they all get paid for doing the work we do in the small businesses. How is it done today? Well, currently there is no effort in creating businesses for them. You have to understand this is for them. Or in other words, here's the important differentiation. I'm turning the entire business model around. In today's market, there are businesses that try to hire people in the spectrum. In my case, I'm creating businesses around the people in the spectrum's skills, and then complementing it by hiring or bringing in people who are neurotypical to work with them. That's the difference, okay? Okay, who cares? Well, the government should care, since it is the best form of integrated workforce development. If you're successful, what difference does it make? Well, if it will succeed because these young adults have marketable skills, we all know. They have a growing population, and they're dedicated workers, and their parents want them to succeed. Then I say, listen, adjust, plan, implement, and keep doing it all over again. And the last thing, which is, I put it in italics because that's my way of saying that I'm not know-it-all. If you have a good idea, talk to me. I will help you to put it through this filter and see if it is worth pursuing for the spectrum population, okay? It is very important that if you have an idea, you should have the very basic that this is meant to be around people in the spectrum, okay? And through all this, we, as I show you at the bottom, we have a registered trademark from the US Patent and Trademark Office that is called Autism Creates. And under that umbrella of the trademark, we have 3 micro businesses. And if you go to everylifeworks.com, you will see them. One is a screen printing business, which we screen print t-shirts and others. One is what you might call, well, I will take you to this one. Let me explain to you this, how we are under the Autism Creates umbrella, how we are going through a 3-pronged approach to address autism community integration and employment. On the left-hand side, there's a nonprofit that just simply trains people. As they come, we train them on skills. It's a private pay nonprofit. None of these entities take any government help from the Department of Disabilities Administration. The middle one, Every Life Works LLC, that is under which we have the screen printing business, we have the usable art business, and I will show you some pictures, and we have some electronic sub-assembly business where we have electronic pumps that we reassemble to repurpose its application. And then there is Powerhouse Consulting Group, which is, we have a lab where we have ceramic manufacturing and other screen printing for high-tech projects, where we have started to train our students also. So between Every Life Works, I'm starting to do from 2018. We started in 2016. Then we created Every Life Works in 2017. So you look at that. At the very top, I've attended 5 art shows. That is our outlet of getting our art out to the community, selling it in art shows. And remember how I said that it has to be competitive. You have to know your competition and everything. We go to juried art shows only, so that we are chosen for the product. And oh yes, these products are created by adults with autism. We have screen printed. We have, like I said, subcontracted to a small business for electronic subassembly. What has happened from 2018 to 2019 in a nutshell is that our volume of business have gone up, okay? And we have won contracts from the Department of Defense to do the laboratory trainings of other high-tech projects also. In 2020, yes, we were going to go up even more, but due to the COVID, we have kind of gone back to online art classes for creating more inventory. Yes, they're doing assembly jobs. Our screen printing continues, and so does the training on labs. What has happened overall by doing this is that their working memory is up, or in other words, they retain a lot more of their functionality in the lab, in their head, so they can repurpose it. Their cognitive overload is down. That means when they first started versus now, they can handle more stress of change of, change of pace. And last but not the least, their earning is up. Objectives for 2020 is to keep increasing the overall skills and comprehension. We're going to introduce robotics to train them, and we're going to start collecting more data for machine learning based analysis. And here are some outreach we have done. I work with a, what you might call a organization, Autism Intervention Unit in Calcutta in India. I'm on their board of directors. I gave them a talk. There was a talk which happened last December of the same thing, because in all corners of the world, believe it or not, parents are waking up and learning that self-employment is the way to go. And then we're having this roundtable webinar. It was an article written about a year ago, which won an award, local award from the Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia Reporters Association. And here are some pictures of our booths of our usable art that we have gone to all the different art shows. So essentially, the reason I'm showing you these pictures is to tell you that it's like any other booth, very competitive, very decorative, competitively priced, high quality product. And here's the differentiator, done by adults with autism, and they're getting paid to do this. It sells. Lastly, I want to tell you something about a life scenario. So here's, you talk about passion, you talk about mission, what you love, and so on and so forth. There is this Japanese word called ikigai. It's a meaning, it means a reason for being, a reason for existence. And essentially, it's at the confluence of passion, mission, vocation, and profession that if you can sit smack in the middle, that you can be useful to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Somnath. We are no longer sharing slides, but that does not mean there's not question time. No, you're good. So if all of our panelists want to turn your video and audio back on, I'm excited to introduce our participants today. So these folks are going to be answering a few questions I pose, and then they're going to be answering a few questions that anybody in the audience poses. And as small as our group is today, if you want to turn your video and audio on in a few minutes when we move to that portion, you're welcome to do that to ask a question. or you can put it in the chat and I'll read it out loud. But we already have been introduced to Somnath, so let's move on and have our next panelist introduce himself. So Dan, if you'd like to begin, let us know who you are and just really briefly what background you have on both autism and entrepreneurship.
All right, so I'm Dan Berger. I'm a web developer an application developer at Vanderbilt. And I'm also on the Frist Center for Autism and Innovation. I've been on staff for the past 7 years, or has it been 7 years? It has been 7 years. And before that, I was a grad student, and before that, I was an undergrad at Vanderbilt. So my duties are physics and astronomy, the Frist Center for Autism and Innovation, ACRE, which is the supercomputer center at Vanderbilt, and Peabody College, which is the College of Education and Human Development. I was diagnosed on the autism spectrum last year, and before that, I had a feeling that I was different, but I had no idea that I was on the spectrum. Even while working at the Frist Center and doing many things at Vanderbilt. The other thing I'll say is the big project that I run is called Filtergraph. It is a web-based data visualization service, and it's used by over 1,000 people around the world, and many of them work at NASA, and we have a partnership with NASA to build visualizations for them. And I believe that covers everything.
Those are the big points. Thank you, Dan. So Dan is our self-advocate on the panel today, but we also have Dr. Vasquez with her son on the line. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves next? And I don't know, Teresa, if your son is going to continue to join us for the panel or if he wants to slip out, it is up to him.
Yeah, I think he'll slip out.
Hello, I'm Ramel, co-founder of Autism Possible. I am a self-advocate and very focused on helping others like me have access to tools and support with their neurological differences. I helped start Autism Possible because I want everyone to feel empowered like me. I'm happy to introduce myself, but will be stepping away and allowing my mom to take over as I have a prior engagement, but wanted to introduce myself.
Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Vasquez, aka Dr. T, Ramel's mom and biggest fan. I'm the co-founder of Autism Possible and an advocate for autistic individuals, namely my son and their families. Autism Possible is an organization that provides services, resources, and tech innovations to empower autistic adults and their families, especially after high school as they navigate the services cliff by providing consistent access to evidence-based practices, and I'm very happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Dr. T. And that leaves our last panelist to introduce herself. That is going to be Brynn Plummer. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brynn Plummer. I'm Vice President of Inclusion and Community Relations at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, where I get to work with Dan and with Dr. T and Ramel and Trinity, the founding team of Autism Possible, every day in and day out. I have limited experience with autism in comparison to many of our panelists today. My deepest experiences were in my time as an educator. So I moved to Nashville in 2011 to teach. I taught a fully inclusive classroom, which included many students who were on the spectrum and students who also had neurodiversity beyond the spectrum as well. And I'm very intrigued by this because I think the work that is emerging in entrepreneurship is getting more deeply intersectional. I think I'm finally starting to see entrepreneurship, this ecosystem and this field start to recognize that we are not immune to all the same isms and the systems of oppression that operate and animate in the rest of the world. And I think that gives us tremendous potential to start to think about how can we build a better world through employing more of the genius and brilliance of all the people who want to make their idea become a reality.
Thank you, Brynn. Great. I would love to jump now back to Dr. T because I think it would be great for our audience to hear a little bit more about like the 1-minute elevator pitch version of Autism Possible, because it's a really fascinating organization that you and your son have co-founded. And for those here who just know nothing about it, kind of give us the rundown.
Yeah, so we, again, provide services and resources that include tech innovations to help autistic adults with life skills and generalization to also help family members monitor these things using tech dashboards and applications that help to prompt and use evidence-based practices embedded within them. But we are a service provider as well. So we do speak at conferences and we advocate and help families learn to advocate on behalf of their kids who are transitioning between middle school and high school as well.
Awesome. Okay. And Dan, I would love to hear too from you if you wanted to give us a little bit more of the timeline on Filtergraph, because as an entrepreneur, that is your biggest undertaking and the thing that you've had a lot of success with related to this whole self-employment and entrepreneurship concept. So tell us a little bit more about how you had the idea for that and how that venture ended up being something that now thousands of people use, including NASA.
So Filtergraph is, so I started on Filtergraph as a grad student. Actually, before I was a grad student, I just finished an undergrad, and we needed some way to manage a data from a telescope that Vanderbilt is running. It's in South Africa, but they have to ship all the data here, and they needed some way to manage it. So I built a data visualization tool for them, and then other people approached me and asked me if they could do the same tool for their data, and then before I knew it, I got a lot of requests for building data visualization portals, and so I wanted to automate this, and so I built Filtergraph, which is the more general version of what I was trying to build to begin with. So anyone can go online, put their data in, and they get a digital visualization portal. And all of a sudden, I was getting hundreds of people from lots of countries that were building data visualization tools, data visualization portals, and so this became my master's thesis. And then after I graduated, there were so many people using it that they wanted to keep me on full time. So I've been doing this. So I've been working on it ever since.
That is so cool. Thank you for telling us a little bit more about that process, Dan. This is kind of a question for everybody. So including Somnath, you are a member of our panel. If you guys had to name just in like a sentence or less, what the #1 biggest challenge you perceive to autistic adults pursuing entrepreneurship, what do you think that is? And anyone who wants to jump in, just like give us a wave, let us know you're going to talk, and then tell me like what comes to mind as the thing that has been the biggest barrier, either in your experience or just as you think about knowing what challenges autistic adults face and the requirements of entrepreneurship.
Well, for me, in my experience, I would simply say ignorance, having to deal with ignorance. That is the biggest challenge, I believe. And I know, as our presenter was speaking, someone had a question about, how do we go about becoming an entrepreneur when, there's might be some communication issues and things of that nature. And the reality is that there are more benefits to employing people on the spectrum than there are negatives. And when it relates to entrepreneurship, we can also, see that in the same way. Ramel is very meticulous My son is very honest. You know, he's approachable. His communication skills might not be that great. And so automatically people think that because he can't communicate the way that they would like him to, that he doesn't have the ability to do anything else. And so fighting that ignorance has been, I think, one of our greatest challenges.
Excellent point. I'm actually going to answer my own question here because something occurred to me. And then if anyone else on the panel wants to address it. But I didn't mention this. I definitely should have. Since college, I've been running sort of a side gig as a photographer, and people book me to take portraits. I've done a wedding or two and some rehearsal dinners, senior photos. I was briefly a photojournalist and a White House photo intern. But I've had that as technically a small business that's a bit more of a side job. And I have found that one of the biggest challenges that I think is related to being on the spectrum is that when you are the person in charge, you don't get to have a singular focus on that one thing you love the most. Like, it's not just about shooting and editing the photos. It's also about managing communications with the client, setting a date and time, finding an appropriate price, being sure that I get everything uploaded to the Google Drive in time. And essentially, I'm somebody who has some challenges with executive functioning and multitasking in 6 different ways at once. And so occasionally I'll let one of those balls drop. And I think that in particular can be a challenge if you are an autistic adult who is trying to start or run your own business.
So that issue, right? Handling all different things when you're running a business. Yes, it defocuses you. You could say that that's a spectrum issue, but I would venture to say now, I mean, taking Teresa's questions and your comments together, I mean, think about if I were to go to Japan today and I don't speak Japanese, what do you think I would do? I would take myself a friend who speaks Japanese, right? So it's the same thing. So if Romel is going to, there was a question here about, my brother is on the spectrum and he's having he have a problem in communicating, right? Take somebody with you, take somebody with you to explain. It's like speaking a different language, right? So speak it. Let the person who's on the receiving side understand that. Because going back to the point you made, Teresa, it's a perception. It's a perception because the benefits, if you can cut through that perception, the benefits of focused work, okay? In the Department of Defense, they talk about standard operating procedures, right? SOPs. I tell people that if you don't want anybody to, mess around with your SOP, hire people with autism. They are going to follow it, okay? So standardized work, doing it dedicatedly, and just doing the job and getting out of it. That's an employment skill every employer would like to have. What is the flip side? That you have to learn a different set of languages to work with them. And you have to accommodate them. One of the principles of entrepreneurship, the reason for Entrepreneurship for Autism is that if you create your own business, you can accommodate yourself. I'll give you an example. My students, when they come to do work, sometimes they will just get up and start flapping hands. And you know what I do? I just say, okay, get it over with. Once they're done with their stuff, come back now, okay? So you accommodate them, they will accommodate you. Okay, so to Claire's point, I will tell you, if you want to excel in exactly what you do, and there are side things you have to do to keep your business going, hire somebody to do it. That's the idea of growing a business, because you have a nice side gig, you can grow it into a business if you carefully hire people who take over those other things for you, and you stay focused in the raw meat of the thing, which is taking good pictures.
Yeah, well, and to that point, I can see how, especially in the fledgling stage of a business, it might even be a family member or a close friend who helps with some of those tasks. And then once you've expanded, you have the financial resources to hire somebody.
And the other thing is that I took a training once on, on recruitments and employment and other things. And the question was asked to the person who was training us that when you go to lobby for somebody for a job to a place, do you tell them that this person is in the spectrum? The answer was, why? I mean, does he have an opening for a person on the spectrum? No. His opening is for a certain set of skills, right? So I would go to the side of saying that walk in, talk about what you can do, present it, have a communication, have a discussion, okay? And bring somebody with you to talk to them. But you don't have to, like, this is not on you to go and disclose that, I'm on the spectrum, therefore this. No, I believe I can do that job. So may I come and speak with you, please?
And I think we could have a whole webinar, like an hour-long discussion about disclosure. Do you do it? When do you do it? How do you do it? Maybe we'll do that in the future, actually. So
That's
great
right.
idea, Somnath.
Claire, can I add one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
To that? I think it's important too that when you do bring that person along, that the individual who you're communicating with sees that the person with autism has given permission for this person to speak on their behalf. Because I feel like if you don't do that, it diminishes the autistic person's skills and strengths. And so when I'm with my son, I make it plain. Ramel, are you giving me permission to speak on your behalf, so that other people see that he is maybe lacking in communication skills, not all the time, because he is allowing me to do this, right? I am his voice because he is allowing me to do that. I think that's really important for neurotypicals to see.
You're there only to serve a purpose. You're not there to take over the whole thing. Yep.
Awesome. That's an excellent point. Thank you so much for specifically pointing that out, Dr. T. Before we move on to audience questions, I have a question for Brynn. So you have worked with a lot of different minority groups at the Nashville Entrepreneurship Center. And in part, you've worked with neurodivergent people and their families, but you've also worked with people of color, with women, and kind of overcome or helped them learn how to overcome some of those barriers to beginning a business and incubating an idea. So could you kind of speak to the idea of intersectionality and how there might be similarities in other groups you've worked with and autistic adults, or even how when you have an entrepreneur who is a person of color and an autistic adult, what multiple levels of barrier might they face as they go through the process of starting a business?
Absolutely. Well, I think some of the things, and this is getting back to this initial thought that I've been thinking a lot lately, which is that entrepreneurship and this world of small business ownership. I know that we're in this moment of hustle and grind, rise and grind, Twitter and all that. We tend to think of it as a utopia in a lot of ways, but again, all the same things that animate out there animate in here. And we can see that when we think about the venture capital gap, where something like 1% of venture capital goes to women of color, 2% goes to people of color more broadly, and then 94% of it is in New York, LA, San Francisco, Boston, New York, San Francisco, and Boston. So there's definitely a lot of concentration, and there's already haves and have-nots when you just think about geography. I think for us, one of the things that we've thought about more as we've layered on, and I like to think about that as layering. I like to think about diversity and inclusion as layering on different ways of different levels of access, different levels of knowledge. I think two things have come to mind in working with all populations who are in whatever way underrepresented or outside of what the white middle class and ascending, upper class even, culture of entrepreneurship in Nashville. And that's one, there's this hidden curriculum. So there's a hidden curriculum behind business ownership. Things are not laid out plain. Things are not clear. Even in our curriculum, and the Entrepreneur Center has been here for 10 years, there's sometimes an assumption that we have a class on business modeling, and the class is essentially telling you the drivers of what is inside a business model, but it is not a template. And so for me, it's coming from my background as an educator, I know that most people who are field-dependent learners need to be walked through a task. They need a template to get a starting point. We need, and I say this as someone who is a very field-dependent learner myself, I need to be walked through something and be given an example. And the assumption sometimes when we have this hidden curriculum is that someone will be able to get to the right resource or get to the right person who will help them elucidate whatever they're encountering. And frankly, that is only possible when you have really strong networks, really dense networks, and networks that have extensive professional expertise. So there's this kind of hidden thing that is truly, we're seeing disparate outcomes because of that. There is a huge assumption that if you didn't get something in class, you're going to go and find it yourself. And the second thing I think that I encounter across all these communities is low expectations societally of what these groups can achieve. And I say that as someone who is a Black, fat woman from a poor background who is depressed and anxious and has ADHD. There's a very low expectation of what someone with, and also, you know, to some degree neurotypical in a lot of ways, and also have tremendous educational access. But there's still sometimes this expectation of like, isn't it cute that this person did this thing? Isn't it nice that this person did this thing? There's this pitying behavior, as opposed to, I think I see people handle more of our white male, say, went to an SEC school, moneyed background, get treated with much more rigor and seriousness in their ventures, which makes them level up faster. So in some ways, when we want to be seen as good, or be seen as like virtue signal with these different entrepreneurs from various backgrounds, we are actually making it harder for them to be successful, and we're actually limiting what their potential can be. And so in the same ways that we see this play on education, this bias and the bigotry of low expectations, we see it all the same ways in the entrepreneurial world. And I think the more someone layers on different layers of oppression or different layers of difference, the more you see those low expectations come to bear, and the more we need a visible curriculum of what it means to own a business. So seeing that first part of the presentation is really enriching and powerful to me, because I think it's visible, it's clear, it's tangible, it's actionable. And so much of what you get in entrepreneurial education is motivational or inspirational, and very lacking in the tactical and pragmatic. So I almost feel like that was an SOP of how to start a business, which I think gives people many, many layers to access. It gives more people the ability and potential to access what is being taught. And I could go on about this forever, because I have a million thoughts about
Brynn, I was going to say, I feel like you should start a podcast or something. Like, all of what you're saying here rings true. And you can speak to so many different angles you come at this. Like, maybe you are the person from a privileged background that has lots of experience and is a great communicator, or maybe you're the opposite, but you still have a great idea and the skills to accomplish it. And so, yeah, I wish we had a whole nother hour to discuss simply the hidden curriculum of business, but we better move on to some audience questions, so we are able to hear a little bit from the folks who have decided to join us and listen. And I think our first question should be the one that Nina just posed in the chat. So if you guys don't know Nina, get to know her. She's super cool. She is a Vanderbilt person. I can never remember if you are a grad student or a postdoc, Nina. I'm so sorry. But Nina's a self-advocate and loves to ask perceptive questions. So the one she asked here, and Dr. T, you may be the person to address this since you kind of brought this idea up. How is it usually perceived if someone brings another person to help them communicate? How well do other people understand why that person is there, and that it doesn't mean that the autistic adult lacks intelligence or knowledge? So I don't know if you want to take a stab at that, Dr. T, or anybody else.
Anyone else can. I, of course, have an opinion on lots of things, namely this, because, you know, we talk about intersectionality of race and disability. And of course, I live that every day with my, with my son. And so this already, the perception that he might lack the intelligence or the knowledge to be able to do certain things. He's actually heavily into chemistry. And so he wants to be a chemical engineer. And so even making those connections has been a process that we've watched, but being there and being available for him has been at a detriment. And so we've kind of had to figure out how to make that work, how to make it happen. And so the idea of permission has been the thing that has been most beneficial to us. So Ramel will say, my time in school, I've had, someone who has been able to help me communicate. And now I am assigning my mom as an advocate intelligence or the knowledge. That perception almost dissipates in many ways because he is giving me that permission. And as a mom, it's hard for me to step back and, watch him struggle. But I think that people need to see that, because just because he's having a hard time communicating does not mean that he is not capable of doing the job or doing the things necessary in order to lead. And and he has a mind of his own, you know? And so I am so grateful that he's allowed me on his journey. And I think if we come with a mindset of humility, as a Black woman in tech, I have, you know, experienced these exact same things. And so because I've experienced them, I understand what he's going through at some level. And so I don't want him to feel that way, because I don't want anybody to feel that way. And so when he gives me the permission, then I step in and only speak to the things that he's given me permission to speak to. And people see him as intelligent and knowledgeable when it comes to those things. You know, every one person with autism is one person with autism, right? Autism is different. It comes in different ways. You know, it presents itself. And I think that, you know, every person with autism, just like a neurotypical, you know, has specific strengths and weaknesses. And so I like to focus on our strengths. And so, you know, during the conversation, he tries to drive towards his strengths as we've worked on. But when something as like a weakness comes up, he allows me or his sister Trinity to speak on his behalf. And like I said, that permission shows that he is the dominant party here. And we are there to support and, you know, and do what he needs us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an excellent response. Did anyone else want to add to that question? No? Okay, great. As I look in the chat, I'm also seeing from, is it Andrew? So Andrew had some questions about his brother. Andrew, I would say if you want to pose a specific question in the chat, maybe boiled down a little, we could definitely talk about it real quickly here. But it may also be helpful if you want to send an email to me or anyone on our panel. Oh, hi, your brother's in the Zoom. What's his name? Okay, hi, Andrew's brother. I'm not sure which channel you're on. Daniel. Hi, Daniel. So if you guys want to talk to us at the Frist Center, we'd be glad to have a probably lengthier conversation than we can in the next 2 to 3 minutes about your skill set and how we can find some exciting opportunities that match that skill set. Obviously, the pandemic has made the whole workforce thing one layer more challenging at the moment, but we have not stopped trying to match people with good employment opportunities. And if you are interested in starting your own business, we would love to have a longer discussion with you about that. Yeah. Sorry I didn't see you at first there, Daniel, but Andrew, Daniel, if either or both of you want to send me an email, my email address is on the Frist Center website. It's claire.barnett@vanderbilt.edu. Yeah. Does anyone else have a question for our panel before we wrap up? We can stay a few minutes past 3 if anyone would like to have their query answered.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm only 18 right now, so I've got a long way to go as far as like developing actual business or something. But one of the problems that I've noticed is that my head, I think like all the ideas I think of like what I want to do for business, all the ideas that I come up with are so far out. They're so sci-fi. They're so like impossible currently. And so I want to know like, how do you guys like manage dealing with things that you have to come to realization are impossible at the current state of technology? So how do you deal with those ideas?
Brynn, I saw some head shaking. Do you have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that gets to the heart of entrepreneurial, like entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneurs who have that savvy, entrepreneurs who kind of have that, who like to dominate the field, you know, and they want to win. We have that kind of entrepreneur who sees opportunity and gets after it. And I think the other one that I see, the other kind of, I mean, there's many, many, many types of entrepreneurs. There are as many entrepreneurs as there are entrepreneurial ventures. But I also love the innovative entrepreneur who sees something that doesn't exist in the world. And there may not be a business incentive to make that thing exist, but there is just a possibility. You know, you think about something like SpaceX. We actually have a term for that in entrepreneurship that is kind of more flowering from the world more broadly, but the idea is called moonshot. So if you've never heard that before, I would just look up like learning from moonshots. And the idea is if President Kennedy had said, we're going to get to the moon in 50 years, we would have made incremental progress to get to the moon, and we likely would have gotten there within 50 years. But because President Kennedy said we're going to be on the moon by the end of this decade, it spurred people to think differently about things and to discover things along the way to get people to the moon that they would not have done otherwise. And so that, what you're describing, this thing of like, it's so far out there, it's like Jetsons. I might be aging myself by saying Jetsons. It's space age, it's way out there. That is a moonshot. And so moonshots may not be, you know, your first entrepreneurial venture, but if you have a passion for moonshots, there are many places where you can be intrapreneurial. You can work within an organization that has like a moonshot R&D. You know, there's places in the world where we are discovering photon teleportation. There are places that need that. And so I think sometimes when you have like an innovative entrepreneur, that person's not always attracted to some of the stuff that Somnath was talking about of the running the business. They're attracted to the creativity, the innovation, all that sort of thing. So I think there's a way to be within an entrepreneurial organization to play that role without necessarily being the CEO. You could be the CEO who's kind of the firebrand who has those ideas, but then you have your chief operating officer who comes in and runs the company. So I would say, I say all that to say, keep writing down these ideas. Most entrepreneurs I know have great ideas every minute of the day. And it's just always a good idea to just keep them written down because you never know what's going to appeal to you at different times. But I think it's good to keep that moonshot, even if it doesn't feel feasible, because aiming for it and thinking about what it would take to get there, you will have other discoveries along the way that would be meaningful. And even if they don't lead to that moonshot, it's going to force you to think in a different way than you would have otherwise. So you could also think about whatever these moonshots are, whatever yours are, something that you said is way, way out there, way far out. Like, what are the conditions that would allow that thing to emerge? So if it's, there's an example, in Google, there is a company with, and you know, Google has hundreds of companies under the Google umbrella. There's one called Sidewalk Labs. And what Sidewalk Labs is trying to do is to make cities act and behave like software. So what if instead of hardwired hardware cities, the road was all tiles that could be communicated with on the software grid? And let's say it started to rain and those tiles could tilt down so all the water was to flow down and not flood the gutters. What if we had a street that needed to be a four-lane street to let all the kids get out of school and all the businesses out, but then it could turn into a green space, flip the tile, it turned into a green space during the day. They're actually making this exist in the world in a little tiny part of Toronto. So the ideas that might seem out there actually might already be existing somewhere in the world. And keep those ideas, because if they don't exist yet, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 30, 40 years of innovation. You're 18, you'll probably live past 100. Who knows what you'll see in your lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So
Awesome.
I have to go because I have a student coming in, but the answer to Jackson Stalling's question is, first of all, I have an email that I wrote to myself in January 2nd or 3rd. It has grown to 17 different ideas, and I keep it as a draft email. And as I go through the year, I cross off things because it's always rotating, going through in my head. Okay, so my answer to your question is, first of all, write it down, okay, in an email to yourself and keep it as a draft. Number two, take those ideas and do Google search. If you get good in Google searching, you will find out, okay? Number three is put those ideas to those questions I just showed. You will start seeing the feasibility of it, okay? So don't let an idea pass by. Write it down, check it out.
Yeah, and you'll find people who are interested in this. I imagine whatever you want to do, there's probably some Reddit page somewhere for other people who are curious in that. So the more you find yourself in those weird hubs, the more you'll get spurred, and you might find that you're actually closer to that thing existing than not.
There is plenty of money in the world. It's like a house. If a house is once built, there's somebody who will buy it. All right, I gotta go, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Somnath.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Somnath.
I would love, Dan, you were going to say something. If you wanted to answer Jackson's question as well, Somnath, we will hopefully see on future webinars as he listens in to hear from our other experts and panelists. Let's take just 3-ish more minutes. So Dan, if you want to address Jackson's question, and then if anyone else wanted to ask a question, we should have time for one more. If you have to leave because you've got something else, we completely understand. This recording will be available on our YouTube later.
So I wanted to say that when I was thinking about filter graphs, I was just doing my job. I was playing around with things. I learned web development. I thought this would be a good way to present the data to whatever researchers were working on a project, a specific project. And it turned out that a lot of people found it useful as well. And there are a lot of other projects that I worked on that didn't rise up to that level. So doing many things, learning many things, exploring many options, and then eventually you'll find something that people will like. I wanted to talk about one more example of an autistic entrepreneur. So there's this guy in the Netherlands called Jelle Bakker, and he builds all these, and he's been obsessed with marbles ever since he was 4, and he would build these enormous marble contraptions, and he would post about it on YouTube, and then other people would watch it, and then eventually he would build all these marble racing competitions. And he would, they would all have an American voice commentator on top of it, and so he ended up with this marble style parody of the Olympic Games, and it happens every year. And now with regular sports being canceled, a lot of people are turning to the marble sports, and they just got a sponsorship from John Oliver. And so, did I mention that Jelle Bakker is on the autism spectrum?
Yes.
Okay, so that's an example of someone who uses their interests and talents and to build something that people would enjoy. He has a huge capacity for imagination and a strong work ethic, and I think that helps him succeed.
Absolutely. That is so cool. And that's a great last thought in terms of like giving an example of someone who just took a passion and a talent and turned it into like his business is running this amazing YouTube page and he's got sponsorships. So I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat, which means what we're going to do is just have our panelists who are still here kind of give that finishing thought. If there was anything else they wanted to say, it's totally fine if y'all don't have anything else you want to share, but I want to give you the chance to, just in case you've got 30 seconds each. Tell us what you want the attendees or whoever watches this later on YouTube to take away from this webinar.
Dr. Vasquez, Dr. T really said it better than I can, but I think what I have learned and what I am learning myself, and I say this not as advice to others, but also as advice to myself, is to remain asset-based as opposed to deficit-based or challenge-based. And my work with neurodiverse entrepreneurs. And also, I hope that's something that everyone else is able to do too. Because this is in the same way that, when we work with LGBTQ entrepreneurs, we talk all the time about how entrepreneurship is a potential avenue for protections and safety and economic uplift that are not available as a free market worker. I think the same can be said for autistic entrepreneurs and autistic individuals as well. There's a lot of opportunity here, and I think we've really just started this.
Absolutely. Dr. T, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, so Autism Possible is very much centered on the strengths of individuals on the autism spectrum and their families. An example of this is we used to say Ramel was like the Incredible Hulk, right? When he was little. He is brilliant and smart, just like David Banner, but there were times where he could just come out and just, terrorize everything. And at the time when we were trying to figure all these things out when he was younger, as time went on, we continued to find out what those strengths were and what those interests were and continue to build on those. And we started to see the Hulk a lot less and a lot less. Well, if you're still following the Avengers, the Hulk actually has become a little bit more tame. And now we see Ramel turning into this Hulk whenever he needs needs to advocate on his own behalf. And that makes me so very proud as a mother, because I want him to have a voice. I want his voice to be important. And I feel like he's not the only one. We want everyone to have that same voice. We want everyone to feel empowered. And so one of the things that I sign off with and that I want to leave you with is for everyone, everywhere, to embrace your mission. Your life is your mission. Your strengths are your mission. Embrace it. Embrace who you are, because you are valuable and you are worthy of all the things that are coming to you, right? But you are also your own hero. You're the hero who you've been waiting for. So just get up and go get it done. Punch fear in the face and do it.
Wow, I'm going to get "You Are the Hero You've Been Waiting For" on a t-shirt, and we're going to sell it. That is awesome. All right, so Dan, you told us about, remind me of his YouTube name one more time, the Marble Fellow, and then if you had anything else you wanted to say.
I'm going to put it in the chat.
Perfect.
Yellow Marble Runs. It's spelled Jelle.
Gel Marble Runs. Perfect. Okay, so whether you're watching live right now or you're watching later on YouTube, look this guy up. One of the coolest things you're ever going to see. And then my closing thought here, and then we are going to end our webinar, is just that if you have any further questions, or you could see yourself starting a business but don't know where to start, or let's say you're just looking for work, period, and you're on the spectrum, or even that you're in a job and you're having trouble with a boss or coworker, those are all things the Frist Center can help with. So please send me an email at claire.barnett@vanderbilt.edu. That is also on the Frist Center website. And let's just have a discussion, because that is our favorite thing to do. And then watch out for this webinar on YouTube and next month's webinar, which we expect to be about international experiences and perceptions of autism. So it's been a pleasure to have all of you participate, and we will see you next month.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for letting us be here and learn from everyone. I appreciate it, Claire. I appreciate the opportunity.
Bye.
Same.
Bye.